I never imagined a single text from my son could shatter the tiny world I had spent 34 years carefully building. That Tuesday afternoon, I was arranging fresh daisies in the living room, letting the soft sunlight spill across the hardwood floors, when my phone buzzed insistently on the counter. I picked it up, expecting a cheerful message, maybe a confirmation about our upcoming family trip. Instead, it was Ethan, my son, and his words hit me like a punch I never saw coming. "Mom, we don't want you on our trip. Ashley says you'd just be in the way." My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I had spent the past month preparing for this family vacation, shopping for outfits I hadn't worn in years, finally getting my passport, even splurging on a professional pedicure, imagining long conversations and laughter with my son and his wife Ashley. I had pictured the turquoise waters, the gentle sway of a cruise ship, beneath my feet, a chance to reconnect to bridge the distance that had quietly grown between us over the years. And now, none of it mattered. I was suddenly abruptly uninvited, reduced to an inconvenient afterthought. Anger and hurt bubbled inside me, swirling with disbelief. But amidst the sting, a strange clarity began to settle. For the first time, I saw Ethan not as the little boy who clung to my hand after his father's funeral, not even as the young man I had cheered for through college and celebrated every milestone with, but as he truly was now. His words revealed a side of him I hadn't fully acknowledged, and as painful as it was, that revelation felt like a strange sort of gift. I glanced around the living room at the home I had poured my love and labor into the walls, echoing with years of family memories. The house I had bought for Ethan and Ashley as a wedding gift, the place I had imagined would always be a symbol of love and security, now seemed to mock me with its quiet permanence. That cherished gift had become a mirror reflecting a truth I could no longer ignore. I had spent decades shrinking myself to meet everyone else's expectations, and in return, my own worth had been quietly dismissed. And at that moment, with the sunlight catching the edges of the daisies I had so carefully placed, I made a decision. It was time to protect myself, time to set boundaries, time to reclaim the life I had long postponed, not just for me, but for every woman who has given too much, sacrificed too often, and yet still struggles to be seen and respected. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt the stirrings of something I had almost forgotten: hope. As I stared at that cruel text, memories of the past 34 years rushed back with a painful clarity. Raising Ethan on my own after his father died in a construction accident when Ethan was just 12 had been a journey of love sacrifice and relentless determination. Those early years were just the two of us against the world, a small, tightly knit team navigating grief and life's unrelenting challenges. I had thought I understood my son completely, that I knew the shape of his heart and the depth of his gratitude. But in that instant, I realized how fragile that illusion had been. Ethan and Ashley had spent 5 years living in the house I had purchased for them as a wedding gift, a home I had imagined would be a safe, lasting place of family memories. They believed it was theirs free and clear, but legally it had always been mine. I had let them think otherwise out of love, out of generosity, and truth be told, out of a desire to see them happy. Now that silence felt like a mistake, a gift misused, a boundary ignored. The betrayal wasn't just in the words of a text message, it was in the years of unspoken assumptions, the casual disregard for the woman who had given everything. I felt the familiar sting of anger rise, but beneath it simmered something unfamiliar and powerful, a sense of liberation. For too long, I had been defined by my sacrifices, shrinking myself to fit into roles that everyone else seemed to need me to play. The time had come to reclaim my life, to assert my rights, and to demand the respect I deserved, not through confrontation or spite, but through clarity, fairness, and courage. I picked up the phone and called my old lawyer, Margaret Caldwell, whose meticulous professionalism I had trusted for decades. Together, we began reviewing the paperwork, ensuring every detail was precise, every legal safeguard in place. If it came to selling the house, it would be done cleanly, transparently, and ethically. My goal wasn't revenge, it was accountability for both Ethan and me. Sitting at my desk, surrounded by the quiet of a home that suddenly felt too large and too empty, I experienced a swirl of conflicting emotions. Grief for the distance that had grown between us, anger at the disregard for my sacrifices, and unexpectedly relief. Relief that I was no longer bound by the expectations, the assumptions, or the casual demands of a son who had forgotten to see me as a person beyond his needs. I realized that this moment, painful as it was, marked the first step toward true freedom. I knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Standing up to the people we love most always carries risk. But I also knew that without courage, without the willingness to set clear boundaries and honor my own worth, I would continue to live small, unseen, and unfulfilled. For the first time in decades, I felt ready to face the consequences, not just of my son's choices, but of my own decision to finally honor myself. After finalizing the initial legal steps, I didn't rush to sell the house. Instead, I allowed myself the rare luxury of stepping back, of taking a breath, and of rediscovering who I was, beyond the roles of mother, widow, and caretaker. For decades, my life had been defined by other people's needs, and now finally, I had the chance to define it for myself. I booked a flight to Ireland, a place my late husband had always dreamed of visiting to see his grandmother's homeland. The thought of walking along the rugged cliffs of County Clare, feeling the wind off the Atlantic, filled me with a nervous excitement I hadn't experienced in years. I also planned trips to France and Italy, destinations I had long imagined but had never ventured to alone. The idea of exploring the world on my own terms without anyone's expectations felt exhilarating and a little terrifying. The first days at Maple Grove Inn in Vermont were like opening a door I hadn't dared to touch. Each morning I woke up without an alarm clock, brewed a cup of coffee, and watched the sun filter through the autumn leaves, painting the forest in shades of amber and gold. I wandered the trails around the inn, breathing in the crisp, pine-scented air, and met other women my age who were also learning to start over, to step into the lives they had postponed. There was a quiet camaraderie in shared stories of reinvention and courage. I tried things I had always postponed: cooking classes that challenged my skills and my patience, knitting lessons that reminded me of the simple joys of creating with my own hands. And then there was Patrick, a charming retired professor who showed me Dublin through a lens of curiosity and humor, pointing out hidden gardens, quiet cafes, and bookstores that smelled like history. With each step, I felt layers of tension and self-doubt fall away, replaced by a growing awareness life was still full of beauty, if only I allowed myself to seek it. It was in these small, deliberate choices that I discovered the real lesson: placing boundaries. Choosing myself and embracing independence are not acts of selfishness. They are acts of wisdom, self-respect, and survival. I learned that a life lived in quiet service to others without claiming space for oneself can leave a soul diminished. But stepping forward, even with fear, opens the possibility of joy, fulfillment, and unexpected adventure. By the time I packed my suitcase for the next leg of my European journey, I felt stronger, lighter, and more alive than I had in years. The woman who had spent decades shrinking herself for everyone else was beginning to bloom again, carefree, curious, and unapologetically hers. And with every mile traveled, every new experience, I realized reclaiming oneself is not only possible, it is necessary. 3 months into my journey of self-discovery, the world I had been carefully reconstructing was suddenly shaken by a truth I hadn't anticipated. A letter from Margaret Caldwell, my long-trusted lawyer, arrived with news that made my stomach churn. Ethan had accumulated a staggering debt due to gambling, and it wasn't just harmless fun. He had become entangled in an illegal money laundering operation. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The cruel text that had shattered me, the message that made me feel like an intruder in my own son's life, it wasn't simple ingratitude. It was fear, desperation, and shame disguised as cruelty. Ethan had been struggling hiding a mounting crisis that threatened not only his financial stability, but his freedom. The realization left me stunned, yet strangely resolute. I knew I couldn't undo the past, but I could help him face the consequences safely. I reached out to the authorities, working closely with the FBI, not to bail him out financially, but to guide him through a legal strategy that would protect him while ensuring accountability. I refused to give him a quick fix. I wasn't going to solve his problems with money. Instead, I would help him navigate a path that required courage, honesty, and responsibility. This wasn't about me saving him, it was about him reclaiming control over his own life with the law on his side. The tension during those weeks was palpable. Each phone call, each meeting brought waves of anxiety and fear. Watching Ethan walk into the FBI sting operation carrying marked bills, wearing a wire, my heart raced like it never had before. Every word exchanged with the men who had been exploiting him was captured, monitored, and meticulously documented. He was no longer just my son, he was a young man confronting the full weight of his choices. Through it all, I realized something profound. Our relationship as mother and son had been tested in ways I had never imagined. I could still be a mother offering guidance, support, and moral grounding, but I was no longer a safety net for his recklessness. He had to learn to face consequences, to take responsibility for the life he had built, and to understand that respect and trust are earned, not assumed. By the end of the operation, the illegal gambling ring was dismantled, and Ethan faced charges for his actions, but with probation, addiction counseling, and a clear understanding of the consequences, he had a chance to rebuild. Watching him step out of the federal building exhausted but alive, I felt an overwhelming mix of relief and pride. He had faced the truth, cooperated fully, and for the first time in years, he truly understood the value of integrity and respect. For me, the journey reinforced lessons I had begun to learn in Ireland and Vermont, standing firm, setting boundaries, and refusing to take on burdens that aren't yours to bear is not only necessary, it can save lives. Watching my son emerge from the shadows of his mistakes, I realized that sometimes the best gift a parent can give is the courage to let their child face the consequences they need to confront. The experience was tense, heart-wrenching, and exhausting, yet ultimately transformative. I had set boundaries, reclaimed my independence, and in the process, given Ethan the opportunity to reclaim himself. The delicate balance between love, responsibility, and self-respect had never felt more tangible or more vital. After everything that had unfolded, I finally understood a truth I had been avoiding for decades. My worth is not measured by my children's approval or by anyone else's expectations. My value does not diminish when others fail to recognize it, and my life does not lose meaning because I choose to honor myself. This realization, both humbling and empowering, marked the beginning of a completely new chapter in my life. I decided to embrace that chapter fully. I rented a small cottage in Ireland for 6 months, perched on the cliffs of County Clare, where the Atlantic winds whispered stories of resilience and freedom. Every morning, I would wake to the soft golden light spilling over the hills, make myself a warm cup of tea, and write in my journal, capturing thoughts I had long suppressed and dreams I had postponed. Wandering through quaint villages, exploring ancient castles, and meeting locals reminded me that life, no matter our age, is still filled with endless possibilities and moments of wonder. I discovered that self-discovery is not only rejuvenating, but essential. I learned to relish simple joys, the scent of fresh baked bread from a local bakery, the laughter of children playing near the cliffs, the quiet thrill of uncovering hidden bookstores with stories waiting to be explored. I even began gentle adventures in cooking, knitting, and leisurely explorations, with Patrick, a retired professor who shared his world with curiosity and humor. Each experience reminded me that stepping out of our comfort zone is not risky. It is life-affirming. Through this journey, I came to embrace 3 vital lessons. First, setting boundaries is necessary. Love does not mean tolerating disrespect or diminishing your own needs to accommodate others. Second, it is never too late to explore and honor yourself. Life will always offer opportunities to live fully, to pursue what brings you joy, and to rediscover who you are beyond the roles you play for others. And third, helping others does not mean shielding them from consequences. My children needed to face their choices and responsibilities, and I realized I could no longer serve as a crutch for mistakes that were not mine to bear. As I embraced these lessons, I felt a profound sense of peace and liberation. I was no longer shrinking to fit expectations or molding myself to meet demands that never truly reflected my worth. I was expanding into the person I had always been meant to be, strong, self-respecting, and unapologetically alive. To every woman watching who has ever felt unseen, unappreciated, or trapped by her own sacrifices, I want you to know this: honoring yourself is not selfish. Choosing yourself is courageous, essential, and transformative. And no matter your age, it is never too late to reclaim your story and live a life that reflects your values and dreams. Thank you for listening to my journey. I hope my story reminds you that self-respect, courage, and the pursuit of your own happiness are timeless gifts. If this story has inspired you, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Real Her Stories. Share your own experiences below. Your voice matters, and together we can continue to inspire, uplift, and empower each other through the power of real-life stories.